it is related to a better outcome. And this is the problem. See, the problem is the people with weaker immune systems. The problem is with people with low levels of interferon. Those people, when they face the virus, what ends up happening is that the body takes time. It takes time to respond. It takes time to respond. And when they end up into the ICU, now the immune system goes crazy. And you have what is called a cytokine storm. The immune system starts to attack even your own body. And you've seen these pictures probably. These people that end up with damage to their lungs, they end up with damage to their kidneys, damage to the brain, secondary to the fact that the immune system was overactive because at the beginning it was not active enough and then suddenly it went crazy. For example, this is a CT scan of the lungs. So it's like if we cut the person and we're seeing the lungs. Do you see these white spots here? They shouldn't be there. That is damage to the lung that happened due to that overactive immune system, because at the beginning it was mild and then it went overactive later on in the progression of the disease. So as you can see, one of the things that will end up determining if we are going to be part of that 20% or of that 80% is going to be the fact of the interference. So let us go and see some practical things you can do. In the book I talk about 22 things. I don't have time to talk about the 22 things, so I'm going to talk about some of the most important ones so that you can at least start with some of these things. Number one, vitamin D. And this is something that has been published quite a bit in the scientific literature. Vitamin D is sometimes called the sunlight vitamin. And this is something that we get by going out on the sunlight, and our body is able to generate some of that vitamin D. But here's the problem. We don't live in Florida. We live in Pennsylvania. So unfortunately, if you live in Pennsylvania, in the late fall, in the winter, and in the early spring, sunlight here doesn't have enough intensity to help you generate enough vitamin D. See, I used to live in Norway. I speak Norwegian because I lived there for many years. And in Norway, they have a public health intervention to help you understand when you need vitamin D. And this is what they teach you there. And this applies here to Pennsylvania. If the month has the letter R, you need vitamin D. Simple. Let's go and check it. January, February, March, April. Then what's next? May, no R. May, June, July, August, and then what else? September, October, November, December. Simple, isn't it? So use that guideline. If the month has an R, make sure you're taking some vitamin D. How much do you need? 5,000 units, that's more than enough. Okay? Make it a routine, because if you are not taking this vitamin D on a regular basis, you're going to end up with low levels. You know, even myself, you know, I like to go out and run outside in the sun and so forth. Even like that I purposely, you know, try to somehow increase my exposure outside. When I checked my vitamin D at the beginning of the pandemic, my vitamin D was too low. You know? was very low. Very worrisome, isn't it? So what we need to do, we need to make sure that we take that vitamin D. The ideal thing would be for you to ask your physician to go ahead and test your vitamin D. Okay? Because as a doctor, I cannot tell you what's your vitamin D just by looking at you. I need that laboratory that tells me. Because if your vitamin D is like way, way low, we're talking about 8, 10, 5, that 5,000 units is not going to do it. You're going to need the prescription strength, 50,000 units, to bump up those levels of vitamin D. So this is something that has been published very well in the scientific literature, how populations that have low vitamin D are at increased risk for severe COVID-19. Next one, metabolism. And what do we mean by metabolism? If the person has issues with obesity, with hypertension, with cholesterol, with diabetes, and so forth, those things end up affecting the way the immune system works. And this is very well documented. One of the things that determine if the person is going to end up with that severe type of COVID-19 are those factors. Now, what can you do if you are one of them that has one of these conditions? Well, I came here to give you good news, not bad news. And this is one of my published studies. This is one of our patients. I used to work in a lifestyle center in Weimar, California. The website of this institution is called NewStart, with a T at the end, newstart.com. So this is a classic patient that came to us. I published this paper in a journal of the American Heart Association. Patient came with problems of diabetes. He was taking one medication for diabetes. Patient had issues with high blood pressure. He was taking 2 medications for high blood pressure, and still his blood pressure was not good. Look at the numbers. It was too high, these blood pressure levels. And he had a significant issue with his weight. He was weighing 381 pounds. But look at the beauty of this. See, I've done this for 25 years. For 25 years, I have worked in lifestyle centers settings when we do this. So in a matter of only 18 days, this patient was able to lose 16 pounds. Is that good news or bad news? Good news. And because his weight came down, we had to stop the blood pressure medication because the blood pressure came down to normal levels. We had to stop the diabetic medication because his fasting glucose came down to normal levels. So, what pill did he take? No pill. What he did is called the NewStart. N for change in nutrition, E for exercise, W for good amount of water, and hydrotherapy, what we're going to talk about in a minute more. Then S for sunlight, remember that vitamin D. T for temperance, which means moderate use of the good things, abstinence of the harmful things. A for fresh air, R for proper rest habits, and T for trust, which encompasses, relational, emotional, spiritual aspect of the person. So, as you can see, the patient got quite a bit of improvement. Now, during the program, we teach patients what they need to continue doing at home. So he didn't say, I got well, I'm going to go back, to my old way of living. No, he learned his lesson. And from now on, he continued, with that plant-based diet, that exercise, that resting, and all those factors. To the point that in a matter of 5 months, he already had lost 83 pounds. Still, no medication for blood pressure or diabetes. And 11 months later, we do complete blood analysis. Everything is exactly the way we want it. You can see his blood pressure, perfect, 110/68, without taking any medication. His cholesterol, exactly where we want it. Your cholesterol goal should be 150 or less. A lot of heart attacks happen in cholesterols of 170, 180, so you need to make sure your cholesterol is nice and low. And what is called the bad cholesterol, the LDL, 61, perfect, that's exactly where we want it. Your cholesterol LDL should be 75 and under, okay? And his prostate exam improved, but the most surprising number is this one that is called the hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is the test that tells me how is a diabetic glucose the last 3 months. So on somebody that is supposed to be diabetic, quote, quote, that has a hemoglobin A1C of 5.5 and is not taking medication, it means he is no longer diabetic. Good news or bad news? Good news, isn't it? So you can see here what ended up happening to this patient in a matter of only a year and a half. After losing 141 pounds, he is no longer diabetic, he is no longer hypertensive, his prostate improved, and he is no longer obese. So this is exactly what lifestyle medicine is all about. In fact, we are in the planning process of starting one of these lifestyle centers here in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Anybody think that's a good idea? Isn't it? So yeah, we urgently need one of these places here, isn't it? And as you can see, the key is to deal with the root causes of the problem instead of just dealing with the symptoms of the problem. There's another one, study that we are in the process of publishing. This is going to be published probably by early next year. This patient that came to us, again, classic patient. Patient had problems with obesity. Patient had problems with allergies. Patient had problems with depression. Patient had problems with cholesterol. Patient had problems with diabetes. Patient had problems with high blood pressure. And in order to manage all those diseases, he had to take this bag of medication every single day. Well, here's the good news. After changing the way he lived, we were able to help this patient stop all these medications. And we did the mathematics. We started counting how much money this patient is saving per year. This is the number. He is saving $53,850 a year of medication he no longer needs to take. Good news or bad news? See, this is the down payment for your new house, isn't it? As you can see, not only you're gonna feel better, your pocket actually is gonna be better off, as you don't need to be using so much money for treating these things. And this is another one of my studies. Again, you find all of this in that ResearchGate page that I gave you at the beginning. This is, we're following our patients that had high blood pressure. And we took all those patients that came to our program in a whole year. Okay, so the sample was nice and big. And we were trying to see what's happening to the medications of these patients as they start making changes and as their health starts to improve. You know what we found out? That 93% of the people with high blood pressure, as they change the way they live, 93% of them are able to stop the blood pressure medication, the majority of them. Good news or bad news? Good news. See, because many times those blood pressure medications can also cause other secondary effects and so forth. So by dealing with the root cause of the problem, the health can improve. So is there anything we can do for our metabolism? Is there anything we can do for our blood pressure, diabetes, and so forth? As you can see, there is a lot that we can do to improve those conditions. Next thing, use wisely natural substances. What natural substances? Well, things such as eucalyptus oil. Look at this title of this study. You don't need to be a scientist to understand this. Let's read the title of the study. Stimulatory effect of eucalyptus essential oil on what? What part? Innate. Is that going to be good or bad? Good, isn't it? We said that the condition of our innate immune system in a big way will determine if we're going to end up with severe COVID. And that's what this study was showing. That the immune system, the innate immune system, is stimulated by exposure to eucalyptus. Now, notice what it says here. Overall, our data demonstrating that eucalyptus essential oil from this tree, Eucalyptus globus, is able to implement the innate immune system, which is good. So eucalyptus oil stimulates the innate immune system. Now, there's something else that you can do. You can use the eucalyptus oil, and you can put some drops, boil that, and let that fill the air or breathe. You can also breathe that. Just be careful. Don't take too much because it's toxic. Okay? There's some people say, oh, eucalyptus is good. You know, you put it there and drink that stuff. Don't do that. But there's a second way you can take advantage of the eucalyptus. And that is through something that the Japanese do a lot. This is something very cultural in Japan. And this is called the forest bathing, they call it. In my book, I have a whole chapter on that. So forest bathing means you go to a place that there is a lot of these trees, and the research shows that by doing exercise or being just there, the eucalyptus tree and the pine tree, they secrete substances that as you are there in that environment, when you breathe them, they stimulate your immunity. Look at this. He was showing those natural killer cells, which natural killer cells are part of your innate immune system. Notice, the more they did it, the more the function of the natural killer cells improved. So this is something that you can do. You need to find a place where there's not a lot of trees, which is not hard to find here in Pennsylvania, isn't it? And you go and do exercise in that type of setting that has an immune stimulating effect. And this is the beauty of this. The effects lasted for 7 days, which means that if you're just able to do it once a week, you still can get that benefit as that starts to improve the immunity for 7 days. Next thing, sleep. And this is a big problem for many people. It is very well documented that the quality of our sleep has an impact on our immunity. And you know that very well. If you are not sleeping well for night after night, your immunity is going to go downhill. So, especially the early sleep is one of the most important ones. In other words, you need to get into the habit of going to bed early. It's not the same thing to go to bed at midnight than go to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. In fact, that's what our ancestors used to do. Because our ancestors, most of them had hard physical work, yes or no? Isn't it? The farms or the mines and so forth. Man, by the time night came, that's the last thing they wanted to stay up, isn't it? They would go and hit the pillow and go to sleep early in the evening. But we modern people think that we're very smart, isn't it? And all that tablets and televisions, video games and the internet and so forth, here they are, you know, getting our attention, and we want to stay later and later. Don't do that. Your time to go to bed maximum should be 10 p.m. Ideally 9:30 p.m. In fact, this was one of my secrets when I went to medical school. I knew about the hormone melatonin that is secreted early in the night. And when I went to medical school, I never went to bed later than 10 p.m. Okay? So I would go to bed early and wake up very early, because I knew that most of the sleep reparation of the body takes place early in the night. Most of the memories are stored early in the night. So if you stay late studying, even though you study more hours, you don't retain that information. And the Lord blessed me. I was able to graduate first place in my class. I don't think that was the only thing, but it was one of the most important things that I was doing when I went to medical school. Another thing that we can do is hydrotherapy. So let's see some of the published research about hydrotherapy. In this study, they had people that were exposed into water that was 39.5 Celsius, which is 103 Fahrenheit. Okay? It's nice and hot. It's not burning, but it's nice and hot, that water. Notice what happened. It says that after 3 hours of being exposed to that hot water, what ended up happening is that those monocytes started working much better. There was an activation of the immune cells. And this other one, notice the title of the article. It tells you what is it about. It says, hyperthermia, increasing the body temperature, enhances what? What does it enhance? Interference. Is that going to be a good idea or bad idea? Good idea, isn't it? So look at this chart. This chart tells you the results of this study in just one graphic. Notice what happened when the person was being exposed to water 39 degrees. What did we say is 103. Notice how the interference exploded. And this is something that I talk about on my published paper, and also in the book. I have a couple of chapters on this. Notice about this. Now, we can learn a lot from the people in Finland. What do the people in Finland do that is very cultural there? Anybody knows? Sauna bath. In Finland, I go there often. I have many research projects there. In Finland, sauna baths are something that every home has one. Okay? Every single home in Finland has a sauna bath. And they use the sauna bath at least 2 or 3 times a week. Something very ingrained, cultural. In fact, the word sauna is actually a Finnish word. Okay? Now let me share with you some interesting statistics. In Finland, 3/4 of the people that died of COVID-19 were foreigners. Fascinating. See, they don't have the sauna culture that the native Finnish populations have. By not doing that sauna bath on a regular basis, the interference were lower and so forth. So, I am not saying this is the only thing you should do, but this is one of the things that you need to consider. And that's what we did. When my wife and my daughters, we went to Finland, we went to the sauna bath, it was the winter, and this is what we did. This is after the sauna. You can see the snow in the ground. That lake is almost frozen. There's my daughter. And there is my other daughter. That water is close to freezing. And there is my wife. And that's me. Now, the Finnish people do this and have been doing this for thousands of years.